The valley of Luther was quiet in the early morning. Mist clung to the silver leaves of the forest, and the air was cold. Every tree in that place seemed alive with soft music made by the wind. But in the center of the valley stood one tree that did not sing. It did not sway. It was the great iron tree. The great iron tree was taller than the highest cliff. Its trunk was wide enough that 20 people holding hands could not circle it. Its bark shone like metal in the sunlight. When anyone touched it, the surface felt like cold stone. The people of Luthar had feared it for longer than anyone could remember. Koran, the elder of the valley, stood on the path leading to the tree. His staff rested in his hand. He was not young anymore, yet his back was still straight and his eyes sharp. He stared at the massive trunk. Around its base, the ground was dark and cracked. No flowers grew there. The small stream that once ran, clear beside it now, carried a dull gray color. People whispered that the water made animals sick and made the land dry. For many years, the people had tried to cut the tree down. They had swung stone axes, forged metal blades, and burned great fires, but the bark did not break. Even the strongest warriors failed. Some were hurt by falling branches as sharp as spears. Others simply gave up, saying the tree was cursed. Koran knew that if nothing changed, the poison in the water would spread to the rest of the valley. But the elders had no answer left to give. That morning, the sound of footsteps came from the forest road. A tall figure in a thick coat appeared. His hair was dark, and his eyes moved quickly as he looked around. He carried a small pack on his back. This was Daniel, a human traveler from another world. Koran had heard of humans before, but had never seen one. He knew they were shorter-lived than the Lutherians, yet they were said to have a strange mix of boldness and patience. Daniel walked straight to the edge of the clearing and stopped, looking up at the great iron tree. He did not speak right away. He simply stood there, studying it. Koran stepped forward. "You have come far, stranger. What brings you to our valley?" Daniel turned his gaze from the tree to the elder. "I was told by a trader in the last town that there is a tree here no one can cut down. I wanted to see it for myself." Koran tapped his staff on the ground. "We call it the great iron tree. Its roots poison our water. If it remains, our valley will not survive, but it is beyond our strength." Daniel nodded slowly. "It is a strange thing indeed. Some villagers had gathered nearby, keeping a safe distance from the tree. They whispered to each other, wondering what this human wanted. Many of them had learned not to hope. The tree had defeated all who challenged it. They believed Daniel would look, maybe touch the bark, then leave like all the others. Instead, Daniel stepped closer to the tree. He pressed his palm against the bark, then knocked on it lightly with his knuckles. The sound was deep, like hitting a hollow drum made of stone. He crouched near the roots, touching the cracked soil and picking up small stones. He smelled them and dropped them back. Koran watched, with quiet interest. "You will not be able to break it. It is too strong." Daniel stood again, brushing dust from his hands. "Maybe. Or maybe it is strong in one way and weak in another. I will need to learn more before I try anything." "You speak as if you will try," Koran said, his tone cautious. Daniel smiled slightly. "If I find a way, I will. But I do not like to promise what I cannot yet do." The villagers began to speak more loudly now. Some said the human was brave. Others said he was wasting time. One man warned that the tree's shadow brought bad luck to anyone who stayed too close for long. Daniel ignored their doubts. He walked around the trunk, pacing slowly, counting his steps. He touched different points on the bark, listening each time. Once he even pressed his ear against it as if hearing something inside. When he finished the circle, he took a small notebook from his coat pocket and wrote something in it. His hands moved quickly as he drew shapes and marked numbers. Koran approached him again. "You study it as if it were a puzzle." "That is what it is. Daniel said. Every problem has an answer. It may not be an easy one, but it is there. The elder looked at him for a long moment. Others have come with sharp axes and heavy saws. They believed strength was the answer. None of them returned with victory. Daniel glanced at the towering trunk once more. Sometimes strength is not the tool you need. The sun was beginning to sink lower. The tree's shadow stretched long across the clearing, reaching toward the stream. Daniel packed away his notebook. I will sleep tonight and think. Tomorrow I will look again. I will need your people to keep their distance while I work, if I decide to begin. You speak as if the choice is yours alone, Karan said, testing the man's resolve. Daniel met his eyes. I will not act without your word, but if I do act, I will see it through. The elder gave a slow nod. There was something steady in the human's voice that Karan could not ignore. Very well. You will have the space you ask for. But I will warn you, Daniel. This tree has seen many seasons and has beaten the will of many. It may do the same to you. Daniel adjusted the straps of his pack. We will see. That night, the village sat around the cooking fires, speaking of the stranger. Some felt a spark of hope for the first time in years. Others feared disappointment more than they feared the iron tree. In the distance, the dark shape of the great trunk loomed against the sky, silent and unmoving. Daniel sat apart from the crowd, his eyes fixed on the shadowed clearing. He had come to Luther to see something impossible. Now he had found it, and in his mind he was already thinking of how to make it possible. The morning came with a soft golden light across the valley. A thin mist still clung to the forest, but the great iron tree stood above it all, unchanging. Its trunk caught the sunlight in a dull, metallic glow. Daniel stepped into the clearing, carrying a small bag and his notebook. The Lutherians watched from a safe distance. None dared to get close to the tree unless they had to. Koran, the elder, walked up behind Daniel. You returned, he said, as if he half expected the human to leave during the night. I said I would, Daniel replied, kneeling to inspect the base of the tree again. His fingers brushed the cracks in the ground, and he tapped the bark with a small metal rod. The sound was deep and echoed faintly. It is hollow in places, he said quietly to himself. Karan tilted his head. You hear something inside? Yes, Daniel answered. There is movement. Not much, but enough to know it is alive in a strange way. I think the roots are carrying something upward. Maybe the poison you spoke of. The elder frowned. If that is true, then it is even more dangerous than we believed. Daniel stood and looked around the clearing. How many times have you tried to cut it down? Too many to count, Karan replied. Axes break. Fire burns only the outer branches. We even tried digging at the roots, but the soil hardens like stone. Daniel nodded slowly. I have an idea, but I will need time and space. No one should come near when I work, and I will need to know the wind patterns here. The wind? Karan asked, surprised. Yes, Daniel said. Sometimes the key to breaking something is not to fight it directly, but to use the way it moves and stands against itself. Karan studied him. You speak with strange certainty for someone who has never faced this tree before. Daniel gave a small smile. I have faced other impossible things. They all fell in the end. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some thought the human's confidence was foolish. Others felt it was the first real hope they had in many seasons. A young Lutherian named Rena stepped forward. If you can truly bring it down, we will remember your name for generations, she said. But if you fail, it will be just another story of someone who tried. Daniel did not look offended. That is fair, he said simply. He spent the Next hours walking in wide circles around the tree, marking the ground with small stones. At times he crouched low to listen to the earth. He would place his hand flat against the soil and close his eyes as if feeling for a heartbeat. He measured the distance from the trunk to the stream. He studied how the branches swayed when the wind moved through them. From time to time, Daniel asked the villagers questions. How strong were the storms here? How deep was the snow in winter? Did the tree make any sound during the night? Each answer seemed to fit into some plan he was building in his mind. By midday, the sun was warm on the clearing. Daniel pulled a thin device from his bag. It had a small screen and a needle that moved when he pointed it at the bark. The Lutherians gathered closer, curious but cautious. The device made a soft hum. Daniel checked the numbers, nodded to himself, and put it away. Koran stepped beside him. I have seen warriors with swords and axes, but I have never seen someone try to bring down a tree with numbers and measurements. Daniel's voice was calm. A sword is only useful if you know where to strike. If you strike the wrong place, the strongest weapon means nothing. This tree will not fall to strength. It will fall to the right weakness. Koran said nothing, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes now. In the afternoon, Daniel gathered a group of villagers and asked them to carry several sealed crates from his small ship at the edge of the forest. Inside were tools the Lutherians had never seen. Some looked like coils of silver wire. Others were round metal plates with strange patterns etched on them. There was even a small box that let out a sharp tone when opened. "What are these for?" Rena asked. "To sing to the tree," Daniel replied. "Every structure has a song it does not like. If you find it and sing it loud enough, the structure begins to shake and break." The villagers exchanged doubtful looks, but Daniel began, arranging the tools without further explanation. He placed the metal plates in a wide circle at the base of the tree. He connected them with wires, burying parts in the soil. Every so often, he would step back, study the placement, and adjust them slightly. By evening, the setup looked like a strange pattern of silver and metal around the massive trunk. The villagers kept their distance, sensing that the human was preparing for something important. Koran approached once more. "When will you try this?" "Not yet," Daniel said. "I will work through the night, but the real test will be tomorrow. I need the sunlight to see the changes in the bark, and I need the wind to be steady." Koran crossed his arms. "And if the tree does not fall?" Daniel looked up at the towering trunk. "Then I will think of another way. But one way or another, I will not leave it standing forever." The elder studied his face and saw no doubt there. "Very well. You have until the next sunset. If it still stands after that, I will order you to stop for the safety of my people." "That is fair," Daniel replied. As darkness began to fall, most of the villagers returned to their homes, leaving only a few to watch from a distance. Daniel worked in the fading light, his tools clicking softly as he adjusted them. The great iron tree loomed over him, silent and unmoving, but its presence was heavy. It had stood for centuries against storms, fire, and blades. Now, for the first time, something different was happening. Someone had come who did not try to fight it with brute strength. Someone who looked at it as a puzzle waiting to be solved. Daniel stood at the base, looking up into the endless branches above. The wind rustled the leaves far overhead, but the trunk stayed firm. He took a slow breath. "Tomorrow," he said under his breath. "Tomorrow we see if you can sing." The sun rose slowly over the valley, painting the silver forest with gold. The great iron tree caught the light on its hard, metallic bark, and its shadow stretched far across the clearing. The villagers gathered at a safe distance, as Daniel had told them. None were allowed closer than the line of stones he had set the day before. Daniel was already at the base of the tree, checking the devices he had arranged. The metal plates were half buried in the soil, each linked by a coil of silver wire. A small control box sat on a flat rock, with glowing numbers on its surface. Beside it lay a case filled with spare parts, tools, and a notebook covered with sketches. Karan stepped up to the marked line, leaning on his staff. "Are you ready? Human?" "Almost," Daniel replied without looking away from his work. He tightened one of the wire connections, adjusted a metal plate, and then stepped back to view the full circle around the trunk. "I will begin soon. Once I start, the ground may shake. No one should cross the line. We will keep our people safe," Karan said. "But tell me, why do you think this will work when nothing else has?" Daniel straightened. "Because no one else tried to make the tree destroy itself. Every object has a weakness. This one is sound." The elder raised his brow. "Sound?" Daniel tapped the side of the trunk with his knuckles. "When I hit it, it vibrates. If I can match that vibration and feed it back into the tree over and over, the energy will build until the structure cannot hold. It will break apart from within." Karan listened carefully, still unsure. "And you have done this before?" "Not with a tree," Daniel said, smiling faintly. "But with walls, metal towers, even a rock bridge on my home world. It works if you can find the right frequency." The villagers murmured among themselves. To them it sounded strange and risky, but the human's steady voice carried a quiet confidence. Daniel knelt by the control box. His fingers moved over the switches, and a low hum began to rise from the metal plates. At first it was almost too soft to hear, just a faint tone beneath the sound of the wind. The plates began to vibrate slightly, sending tiny ripples through the soil. The iron tree seemed unaffected. Its great trunk stood unmoved, as if ignoring the challenge. Daniel adjusted the controls. The hum changed pitch, becoming deeper and more focused. The villagers could feel it in their feet now, a faint trembling in the ground. Birds in the nearby forest took flight, startled by the unfamiliar sound. Karan watched the trunk carefully. "I see nothing changing." "Not yet," Daniel said, eyes on the readings. "This is the first step. The energy must travel deep into the roots. When the whole structure is moving together, that is when it will break." Minutes passed. The hum grew stronger. Some of the villagers covered their ears, but Daniel remained calm, turning knobs and pressing buttons. His eyes stayed locked on the tree as if waiting for it to speak. Then there was a faint sound from the trunk. Not the hum from the machines, but a groaning noise from within the bark itself. Karan's eyes widened. "It is answering you." Daniel nodded. "Good. That means I found the right place to push." The sound grew louder. The vibration was no longer just in the ground. It was in the air, in the bones of anyone standing nearby. Fine dust began to drift down from the branches, and a few small flakes of metallic bark broke free, fluttering to the earth. The villagers gasped. Never before had they seen even a single piece of the iron tree come loose. Daniel increased the power. The hum rose to a sharper pitch. The trunk shivered slightly, and long cracks began to appear in the outer bark. They were thin at first, like scratches, but quickly deepened as the sound drilled into the tree's heart. Suddenly, a loud snap echoed through the clearing. One of the high branches broke off and crashed to the ground, sending up a spray of dust. The villagers stepped back in shock. Daniel's voice stayed calm, though his hands moved faster over the controls. "The outer shell is failing. Now we aim for the core." He shifted the frequency again. The hum turned into a deep, rolling pulse that thumped in the chest of everyone listening. The great iron tree trembled from its roots to its highest branches. More cracks split open, and chunks of bark fell like heavy stones. Rena, standing beside Karan, whispered, "It is working." But Daniel was not finished. He pushed the machine to its limit. The hum became a roar, the ground shaking so hard that loose soil slid away from the base of the tree. The villagers could see the trunk bending slightly under the strain. A second snap rang out, louder than the first. Then another. The iron tree's core, once hidden under layers of unbreakable bark, was exposed. A twisted lattice of dark wood streaked with strange crystal growths. The crystals vibrated violently, shattering into sharp fragments. Daniel eased the power back slightly, controlling the collapse. "Too fast and it will fall in the wrong direction," he said under his breath. The villagers were frozen in place, eyes wide as the impossible happened before them. The tree that had stood for centuries, defying every tool and fire, was breaking apart under the hands of one human with strange devices. At last, with a sound like thunder rolling through stone, the trunk split almost in two. The great iron tree swayed once, twice, then began to fall. The earth shook as it crashed to the ground, branches snapping, dust billowing into the sky. Silence followed, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the distance. Daniel turned off the machine and stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at the fallen giant without a trace of triumph, only quiet satisfaction. "It was just a matter of finding the right weakness," he said softly. Karan approached, still staring at the massive trunk lying in the clearing. "You have done what none of us could. The valley will remember this day." Dust still hung in the air like a thin cloud after the crash of the great iron tree. The villagers stood in silence, staring at the fallen giant. It stretched across the clearing, its broken branches pointing toward the forest as if trying to hold on to its place. The sunlight now reached the ground where for centuries there had been only shadow. Daniel stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching over shattered pieces of bark. He placed his hand on the exposed wood. It was warm, as if the collapse had woken something inside before it died. He followed the line of the trunk toward the base, where the roots tore out of the ground like massive claws. Karan and several villagers approached with caution. The elder's eyes were fixed on the deep cracks in the wood. "It feels strange to see it like this," he said. "For so long it was untouchable, and now it lies here like any other fallen tree." Daniel crouched near the roots. "The real problem may still be underground. The bark was only the shield. The soil at the base of the tree was a dark, unhealthy color." Daniel began pulling it aside with his hands, uncovering the thick roots. They were twisted, and in some places they glittered faintly in the sunlight. The glitter was not from water or stone, but from sharp crystals growing directly out of the root surface. "What are those?" Rena asked, kneeling beside him. Daniel tapped one gently with a small tool from his pocket. It gave off a dull, ringing sound. "These are not natural for a tree. I think they store whatever poison has been spreading into your water," the villagers murmured nervously. They had feared the tree, but they had never imagined that its roots held strange stones like these. Daniel reached for a metal case he had brought earlier. He placed a crystal inside, sealing the lid tightly. "If these are left in the ground, the water will stay poisoned even without the tree." Karan frowned. "Then we must remove them all." "Yes," Daniel agreed, "but carefully. They may be fragile, and if broken, the poison could spread faster." Daniel set to work, digging slowly and prying the crystals loose one by one. He wore thick gloves and placed each crystal into sealed containers. The villagers watched him in silence, impressed by the care and focus he showed. After several hours, a shallow pit surrounded the base of the fallen tree. Dozens of crystals now lay sealed in Daniel's metal cases. The roots, free from the glowing growths, looked pale and lifeless. Rena looked into the pit. "Will the soil heal?" "In time," Daniel said, standing up and wiping sweat from his brow. "Nature recovers when the source of harm is removed. Your water should clear as the rains wash this ground." Karan rested his hand on his staff. You came to cut down a tree, but you have given us more than that. You have removed its poison as well. Daniel shrugged lightly. It would have been pointless to fell the tree if its poison remained. A problem must be ended at the root. Some of the villagers began to move closer to the fallen trunk, touching its surface now that it was safe. Children ran their hands over the strange, metallic bark, amazed at its hardness. A few men and women began cutting small sections from the branches to keep as a memory. The air in the clearing felt lighter without the looming presence of the iron tree. Sunlight warmed the soil, and a soft breeze carried the smell of fresh earth instead of the bitter scent the tree had always given off. Daniel closed the last metal case and set it near his other equipment. These crystals should be stored far from the water supply, he told Karan. I will take them when I leave if you wish. My ship can keep them contained. That would be best, Karan agreed. We have no place here to keep such dangerous things. Rena stepped closer to Daniel. So it is done? The valley is safe now? Daniel looked at the open pit, the broken tree, and the sunlight on the ground. It is safe from this tree. But what comes next is just as important. The land. Here is bare now. Without something to replace the tree, the soil could wash away in the rains. The elder turned his gaze toward the forest. We have seeds of trees that once grew here long ago. The skywood tree was gentle and strong, but it vanished from this part of the valley when the iron tree took over. Daniel's eyes lit with interest. Then that is the answer. We clear the poison, and we plant something good in its place. Some of the villagers looked doubtful. Can anything grow here after so many years of poison? One asked. Daniel pointed to the pit. With the crystals gone, the ground will heal. It will take care, but it can be done. The villagers began to speak among themselves, some excited, others unsure. For generations, their only thought had been how to destroy the iron tree. Now, with it gone, they had to think about building something new. Karan stepped forward, placing his hand on Daniel's shoulder. You have done what none of us could. And now you speak of what we can build after. That is wisdom our people must remember. Daniel gave a small nod. Cutting down is only half the work. Replacing with something better is the rest. The evening sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fallen trunk. The villagers began to leave the clearing, their voices carrying a new tone, not just relief, but cautious hope. Daniel remained for a while longer, packing his tools and checking the sealed cases of crystals. He glanced at the open space where the tree had stood. The wind moved freely there now, and in the silence, he could almost imagine the space already filled with green leaves of a skywood tree. The next morning, the valley woke to a sight it had never known. Sunlight poured into the clearing where the great iron tree once stood. The heavy shadow that had darkened the soil for centuries was gone. The open ground felt strange to the villagers, almost too bright, too bare. Karan walked slowly to the center, his staff tapping against the earth. He stopped at the pit where the roots had been torn away. Without the towering trunk, the clearing looked larger than anyone remembered. A light breeze carried the smell of fresh soil, but also a faint emptiness. Rena joined him, carrying a basket of food for the workers who had helped clear branches from the edge of the forest. It feels strange here, she said, like something is missing, even though that tree was our enemy. Karan nodded. We lived in its shadow for so long that we forgot what the ground looks like without it. Daniel arrived soon after, carrying his sealed cases of crystals toward his ship. He set them down near the forest's edge before walking to the pit. The air is better today, he said, breathing deeply. Your water will clear in time. Then the danger is truly gone? Rena asked. Yes, Daniel said, but the land will not heal fully unless you give it something new to grow here. Karan looked at the open space thoughtfully. We spoke yesterday of the skywood tree. It once grew in this part of the valley, tall and gentle. Its leaves cooled the air and its roots fed the soil. But when the iron tree took over, it drove all others away. Daniel crouched to touch the soil. It was still dark, but softer than before. If you still have the seeds, this is the place to use them. Rena's eyes brightened. We have one seed left, kept in the Elder's Hall. It has been stored for many years. The Elder hesitated. It is our last. If it fails, there will be no more. Daniel looked up at him. Then it must not fail. I will prepare the ground so the seed has the best chance to live. The three of them walked back to the village together. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd gathered in the Elder's Hall to see the seed. It was larger than an acorn, smooth and pale gold in color, with faint lines across its surface. The villagers handled it with great care, as though it might break at a touch. This seed carries the memory of the skywood, Karan said. If it grows, the valley will have shade, clean air, and rich soil again. Daniel studied it for a long moment. It will grow, he said firmly. But we will plant it where it has the best chance. That means preparing the ground and protecting it from storms until it is strong. By midday, Daniel and several villagers returned to the clearing. They worked together to dig out the last of the poisoned soil from the pit, replacing it with rich earth taken from the forest. Daniel showed them how to mix crushed leaves and clean water to help feed the roots when they came. Rena knelt in the center of the pit, running her fingers through the soil. It feels alive now, she said. That is a good sign, Daniel replied. Healthy soil has a voice of its own, if you listen. As they worked, more villagers arrived, bringing stones to mark the planting place and wooden stakes to form a protective circle. Even those who had doubted the plan came to help. The emptiness left by the iron tree had weighed on them more than they expected. Planting something new gave them purpose again. By late afternoon, the pit was ready. The rich earth was smooth, the air smelled fresh, and the sunlight fell evenly across the clearing. Daniel wiped his hands on his coat and turned to Karan. It is time. The elder stepped forward with the skywood seed in both hands. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the forest. Then Karan held the seed out to Daniel. You cut down the tree we could not. It is right that you should plant this one. Daniel accepted it carefully. The seed was warm in his palm, as if carrying its own quiet heartbeat. He crouched in the pit, dug a small hole at the very center, and placed the seed inside. With slow, steady movements, he covered it with soil and pressed it gently. It is done, he said. The villagers stepped closer, placing small stones and flowers around the new planting spot. Rena poured a clay jug of water over the soil. Daniel set 3 small devices into the ground around it. They looked like thin rods, each topped with a tiny disc. What are those? Rena asked. They will measure the soil's moisture and temperature, Daniel explained. If the weather turns too hot or dry, you will know when to water and protect it. Karan looked at the devices with interest. You prepare for the future as carefully as you prepared to bring down the iron tree. Daniel nodded. Both require patience. The difference is that this work is about building, not destroying. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, the villagers stood together around the planting site. The clearing no longer felt empty. The small mound of earth in its center held the promise of something greater. Rena smiled as she looked at it. One day, this tree will be taller than all of us, and its roots will drink clean water, Daniel said. It will not harm the valley. It will feed it. Karan rested his staff against his shoulder. We will guard it well. Your work here will not be forgotten, Daniel. The human looked over the faces of the villagers, their expressions a mix of relief and hope. Guard it not for me, he said, but for yourselves. What you grow here will outlive all of us. As the last light of day faded, the people of Luther left the clearing one by one. Daniel remained for a while longer, listening to the quiet. The wind moved gently over the fresh soil, and in that sound, he thought he heard the beginning of the skywood song. Days passed after the skywood seed was planted. The clearing that had once been dominated by the great iron tree slowly began to change. Where the shadow of the giant had kept the ground dark, sunlight now touched every inch of soil. The villagers worked alongside Daniel, tending to the newly planted seed and preparing the area for its growth. Daniel checked the small devices he had set around the planting spot. The rods measured moisture and temperature, sending faint signals that Daniel could read from his control box. He adjusted small channels in the soil to carry water from the stream to the pit, ensuring the young seed would never lack nourishment. Rena knelt beside him, brushing soil gently over the mound. "It feels alive," she said, "like it knows. Someone cares for it." Daniel smiled. Plants respond to care. Roots grow stronger when the soil is healthy and sunlight gives them energy. This seed will need everything we can give it until it can survive on its own. Karan approached, leaning on his staff. "Do you really think it will grow as tall and strong as the iron tree?" Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, it will not be the same. But it will be better for your valley. Its roots will feed the soil, its leaves will cool the air, and it will not harm the water. Growth is more important than size." The villagers worked steadily each day. They carried buckets of water, removed stones from the soil, and cleared small patches of weeds. Even children helped, running along the paths to collect fallen leaves and sprinkle them over the seed for extra nutrients. Slowly, the clearing began to look cared for, not empty. Daniel spent time with each villager, showing them how to read the small devices and check the soil. "The tree will teach you patience," he said. "It cannot be rushed. If you try to force it, it will weaken or die, but with steady attention, it will thrive." One afternoon, Rena noticed a tiny green shoot emerging from the soil. She pointed excitedly. "Daniel, look! It is growing!" Daniel crouched to examine it. The seed had split, and a delicate sprout reached toward the sunlight. "Good," he said quietly. "That is the first step. Now we protect it and help it grow stronger." Karan and the villagers gathered around. For the first time in many seasons, they felt hope rising in their hearts. The seed had survived, and now the valley could begin to heal. Over the following weeks, the skywood sapling grew steadily. Its thin leaves stretched upward, catching sunlight and drawing strength from the soil. Daniel adjusted water channels and soil coverings to make sure the roots spread safely. The villagers learned from him, taking on responsibilities themselves. The clearing became a place of care, filled with laughter and quiet work. Rena often sat by the sapling, tracing her fingers along the soft leaves. "It feels like it is part of the valley already," she said. Daniel nodded. "It is. Trees do more than grow. They hold soil, carry water, and bring life to everything around them. One tree can change an entire valley if it is given a chance." One morning, after a night of rain, Daniel inspected the sapling. The small shoot had grown taller overnight. Water had soaked into the soil, making the leaves shine with fresh green color. Birds and small animals returned to the clearing, drawn by the soft shade and clear air. Karan observed quietly from a distance. "It is remarkable," he said. "I have lived my life among trees, but I have never seen one grow so well under care like this." Daniel smiled faintly. "The valley helped it too. Nature responds to balance. You cleared the poison, prepared the soil, and protected it. That is why it grows." The villagers noticed other changes in the clearing. The water in the small stream looked cleaner, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Insects and birds that had not been seen in years returned, and the soft hum of life filled the air. Even the soil beneath their feet felt softer, richer, and warmer. One evening, as the sun set behind the forest, Daniel spoke to Karan and Rena. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The skywood will take years to reach full height. But if you continue this care, your valley will become stronger than ever before. You will see balance and life return in ways you have never imagined." Rena nodded, eyes bright. "We will continue. We will protect it and help it grow, just as you have helped us." Karan rested a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Your work has done more than cut down a tree or plant a seed. You have taught us patience, care, and hope. That is a gift far greater than any tool." Daniel looked at the sapling, small but full of life. "Remember this," he said. "True strength is not in destruction. It is in the power to build, protect, and give life. That is the legacy that will outlast any one of us." Over the following months, the skywood continued to grow. Its roots spread slowly but firmly through the cleared soil. Its small leaves multiplied and caught the sunlight, giving shade to the clearing. The villagers watered it, tended to its soil, and built small fences to protect it from storms. Children played around the area, learning the importance of care and attention. The valley began to heal in ways that could be seen. Birds nested in nearby trees, water sparkled in the streams, and animals returned to the forest. The once empty clearing felt alive. Daniel taught the villagers to watch and listen to the sapling, to notice changes in the soil, and to take action when needed. Through this work, the people of Luther learned a lesson that no one had understood before. Strength was not only in swinging axes or building walls. Strength was in care, patience, and responsibility. One human had come and shown them this truth. As Daniel prepared his ship to leave for another part of the world, he walked one last time through the clearing. The skywood sapling reached his waist, its leaves glowing faintly in the sunlight. The villagers gathered to say goodbye, proud of what they had achieved together. Rena smiled, brushing dirt from her hands. "It will grow taller than all of us, and the valley will be safe again." Daniel knelt, placing a hand gently on the young tree. "It will do even more than that. It will teach generations to come the value of care and hope. That is the real gift." The villagers watched as he boarded his ship. When it rose into the sky, they felt a quiet pride. Their valley, once shadowed by the great iron tree, was now filled with light and life. The future they had once feared was now full of promise. Years passed in the valley. The skywood tree, once a small sprout in the open clearing, now stood tall and strong. Its thick trunk rose higher than any of the villagers had imagined. Broad green leaves stretched outward, giving shade to the clearing that had once been darkened by the great iron tree. The air smelled fresher, the soil richer, and the streams clearer than ever before. The villagers gathered beneath the skywood, remembering the days when fear had ruled their valley. Children played along the tree's roots, their laughter ringing through the forest. Birds nested in the branches, and small animals darted through the undergrowth. Life had returned fully to the land. Rena stood near the tree, running her hands over its wide trunk. She smiled at the growth that had come from the tiny seed she had once held. "It feels like the valley is alive again," she said quietly. Karan nodded, leaning on his staff. "It is, and it will continue to be alive for generations. This tree is more than a plant. It is proof that care and patience can rebuild what was once broken." Daniel had long since left for other worlds, but the villagers still spoke of him. They told stories of the human who had come without fear, who had cut down the impossible iron tree and planted the skywood in its place. His methods were strange, but his wisdom had changed the valley forever. The villagers had learned from him. They worked together to maintain the clearing, building channels to guide water and protect the tree's roots. They learned how to nurture the soil, how to listen to the land, and how to live in balance with nature. One morning, the valley awoke to a gentle wind moving through the skywood's leaves. It carried the faint scent of flowers from nearby meadows and the clean freshness of flowing streams. Rena watched the movement, feeling a deep peace she had never known. "Look," Karan said, pointing to the top branches of the tree. "A new shoot has appeared. The tree is expanding." Rena followed his gaze. Tiny new branches pushed toward the sky, each leaf a bright green jewel in the sunlight. "It is growing faster than before," she whispered. "Yes," Karan replied. "A strong tree grows best when it is protected, nourished, and loved. That is what Daniel taught us." The villagers began preparing the land around the skywood. They planted smaller trees nearby, following Daniel's advice to encourage balance in the soil. Wildflowers and grasses were sown to prevent erosion. Streams were cleared of stones and debris so water could flow freely. Slowly, the valley transformed into a lush, vibrant landscape. Children ran along the paths that had once been empty and dry. Birds sang in every tree, and the hum of insects filled the air. The valley was alive with color and sound, a sharp contrast to the days when the iron tree had stood, dark and poisonous. Rena sat at the base of the skywood, looking up at its towering branches. "It feels like Daniel is still here, guiding us," she said softly. Karan smiled. "He is, in a way. He gave us more than help with the tree. He gave us knowledge, patience, and the will to care. That is stronger than any tool or weapon." The seasons passed. The skywood grew taller and wider. Its leaves provided shade during the hot months, and its roots held the soil firmly in place. Water flowed through the valley without poison, and the forest nearby thrived. Animals returned in numbers unseen for centuries. One day, travelers arrived from distant lands. They had heard of the valley and its legendary skywood tree. They came to see the miraculous tree that had replaced the feared iron tree. The villagers welcomed them, showing how the land had been restored. The travelers marveled at the size and strength of the skywood. They noted how the streams sparkled, how the air smelled sweet and clean, and how the forest hummed with life. Many asked the villagers how they had achieved this. Rena spoke proudly. "It was not just us. A human came to help. He taught us how to care, to understand the land, and to build life instead of destroy it. With patience and attention, we planted a tree that now protects and feeds our valley." The visitors listened carefully, realizing that the story was more than about a tree. It was about courage, wisdom, and the power of humans to help where others could not. Karan joined Rena and addressed the crowd. "Strength is not measured only by what one can cut down or conquer. True strength is in care, in rebuilding, and in protecting life. That is the legacy Daniel left us." The skywood swayed gently in the wind as if nodding in agreement. Its branches reached across the clearing, touching the edges of the valley. Light filtered through its leaves, casting green patterns on the soil below. The valley felt calm, alive and safe. As the sun set, casting long golden shadows across the land, the villagers gathered beneath the skywood. They held hands and watched the colors change in the sky. The valley had been dark and poisoned once, ruled by fear and the shadow of the iron tree. Now it was bright, full of life, and filled with hope. Rena whispered to Karan, "It is beautiful. We could not have imagined this before." Karan nodded. "No, but one human showed us the way. He showed us that with care and courage, even the impossible can be changed. We have learned that lesson well." The wind rustled through the skywood's leaves, carrying the sound of life across the valley. Birds sang, water moved freely in the streams, and small animals played among the trees. The skywood stood as a symbol of hope, a reminder that patience, care, and human wisdom could bring life to places once lost. From that day forward, the villagers never forgot the lesson of the human who had come to their valley. They passed it to their children, teaching them that strength lies not only in force, but in understanding, patience, and the will to build. The valley thrived, greener and healthier than ever before. The skywood tree reached higher each year, its branches strong and wide, sheltering the land and all who lived there. Life returned fully, and the memory of the iron tree became a story of warning, a lesson in how destruction can be overcome with courage and care. And in the quiet moments of dawn or dusk, the villagers sometimes swore they could hear the faint hum of the human's voice in the wind, guiding the skywood and reminding them that life is strongest when it is nurtured. The valley was no longer just a place on the map. It had become a living example of hope, of human courage, and of the difference one person can make. The skywood tree, once a tiny seed, now stood as proof that even the most impossible challenges could be overcome, and that life could flourish when given attention, love, and care. The story of the human who cut down the tree they could not, and planted another in its place, became a legend, not only for the villagers of Luther, but for all who would hear of the valley, the skywood, and the power of patience, wisdom, and hope.